Tunde, where did this come from?
I don't know, Adanna. I just woke up. It wasn't here before.
The very first thing Adanna Aziz saw on her third morning as a married woman was a plate of food she didn't cook. It was sitting right in the middle of the wooden table like it had always been there. It was jollof rice shining with red palm oil, a whole grilled tilapia with its eyes still wide open, and a side of steaming kontomire stew that looked like it just came off the fire. The window was completely shut. The door was locked tightly from the inside, just the way she had locked it herself before going to bed. And yet, there it was, breakfast waiting for them. Adanna stood in the kitchen doorway with her wrapper still tied loosely around her chest. Her heart was beating fast in her chest, pounding like a fist knocking on a locked door. She hadn't touched a single cooking pot since their wedding party 3 days ago. Her husband, Tund, was still asleep in the next room. His breathing was slow and calm, totally undisturbed, as if nothing was wrong in the world. Tund, she whispered, then she called out louder, Tund. He stumbled out of the room, rubbing his eyes. He was a tall man with broad shoulders like a thick wooden doorframe, and a face that used to make her feel like the luckiest woman in Alare. That he looked at the table. He looked at the food. And then, this is the creepy part that will give you goosebumps. He simply picked up a spoon, sat down, and started eating. Tund, I didn't cook this, Adanna said. I know, he replied without even looking up. Then who did? He chewed slowly, swallowed his food, and simply said, Eat, Adanna. It's good. It won't eat itself. That was the first morning, but it definitely wasn't the last. If you've never walked through the streets of a town like Alare early in the morning, let me describe it to you. The sky looks like a deep purple fruit split open, with bright orange mixing into pink. The smell of wood smoke rises from 100 compound houses before the roosters even finish crowing twice. Women carry big basins of kenki and boiled eggs on their heads, calling out prices in loud voices that could wake up the dead, and maybe in this story, they almost did. Okada motorbikes cough to life on the red dirt roads, weaving around goats that seem to own the streets more than the people do. Over at the Danfo bus station, a conductor hangs halfway out of a rusty Nissan bus, slapping the metal side and shouting, Abasai, one more person, while passengers bargain over bus fares with the kind of patience you only get from doing it your whole life. This was the town Adanna had moved to 3 weeks ago. She was a bride from Adowa who married into the Aziz family with lots of drumming, dancing, and enough fine Kent cloth to make her aunties cry tears of joy. But back then, she didn't know she was moving into a house with a secret buried under its floorboards. Now, before we go any further, come close, because this isn't a story you want to watch while distraction on your phone. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, tap the like button, and before the food gets cold, drop a comment to tell me where in the world you're watching from tonight. Now, blow out the extra lamp and leave just one flame burning. This story doesn't like too much light. The food kept coming. Every single morning, without fail, a new dish was waiting on the table. Sometimes it was fufu with light soup so spicy that it made her eyes water. Other times, it was wache wrapped in banana leaves the traditional way, the old way that almost nobody in town took the time to do anymore. And here's the weirdest part, the thing that first planted real fear in Adanna's heart: the food tasted unlike anyone else's cooking she had ever had. It had a very specific style, like a signature mark from a specific person's hand. There was too much nutmeg in the light soup, a tiny touch of ginger in the kontomire that most cooks usually skip, and palm oil added not by measuring cups, but by memory and love. She only figured out whose cooking it was when she visited Auntie Shade, an old woman who lived 2 houses down and had known the Aziz family since before Tund was even born. You're eating very well, I can see, Auntie Shade said, looking at Adanna up and down with those sharp eyes old women used to inspect everything. Your face is glowing just like Aya Agbra's used to. Adanna froze. Who is Aya Agbra? The old woman stopped threading her beads. Tund's mother. Wait, didn't he tell you about his mother, Aya Agbra Aziz? That woman could flavor a whole stew with just her thumb and make grown men cry. She passed away, oh, it must be 6 years ago now, long before you came to this town. Adanna felt a cold chill run down her spine, even though the hot afternoon sun was beating down on her shoulders. 6 years dead. And yet, That very morning, Adanna had eaten light soup seasoned in the exact way Auntie Shade was describing. Too much nutmeg, a secret touch of ginger, and palm oil poured straight from the heart instead of a cup. Auntie, Adanna asked slowly, does anyone still cook the way she did? Did she teach anyone? Auntie Shade stopped working with her needles completely. She looked over both shoulders, even though there was nobody else in the small courtyard except the two of them and a hen pecking at the dirt. You're the second wife, the old woman said softly. It wasn't a question. Nobody told you about the first wife? Those words hit Adanna like a heavy stone dropped into calm water. Ripples of fear spread outward from her chest all the way to her fingertips. The first wife? Adanna repeated. Tund never told me he had a first wife. Folktale, the old woman said. Just saying the name seemed difficult for her. She lowered her voice the way people do when they're sharing a secret that is too heavy to speak out loud. Folktale married your husband 7 years ago. She was a beautiful girl, quiet and always smiling, but she had sad eyes, the kind of sadness that stays under a smile and never goes away. 2 years into the marriage, she disappeared. They said she died. They even held a small funeral ceremony, wore black mourning clothes, and women cried in the yard for a whole week. So she's buried in the family cemetery then? Adanna asked. Auntie Shade shook her head slowly, and that single, slow shake turned Adanna's blood ice cold. There is no grave, the old woman whispered. No body was ever found. No coffin was ever buried. They just said she died, and because it's easier to believe what you're told than to ask dangerous questions, the town just let it be. But I'm telling you this, my daughter, and I'm telling you because you are eating food that walks into your kitchen without feet. In this land, a person who isn't buried properly cannot rest. And a person who cannot rest will always come back to speak. That night, Adanna couldn't sleep at all. She lay next to her husband, listening to the crickets chirping loudly in the dark bushes outside the compound wall. She listened to a dog bark 3 times and go completely silent. She listened to her own heart counting down the hours. Then, around 3 o'clock in the morning, she heard it, the undeniable sound of a grinding stone scraping against a mortar, coming right from inside the locked kitchen. It was a slow, steady, patient sound. The exact sound a woman makes when she has all the time in death to prepare a meal just right. She didn't move. She didn't even breathe. She lay there completely frozen beside her sleeping husband, staring at the ceiling until the scraping sound finally stopped and the gray morning light began to creep under the door. When she got up, there was fufu sitting on the table. It was pounded so smooth that it looked like it had been prepared by hands that had done it 10,000 times before. But right beside the bowl of soup, pressed directly into the fufu itself, was something that made Adanna's knees buckle, a single cowrie shell. It was the kind used in ancient traditional rituals, the kind people used to speak with spirits from the other side. She wasn't just terrified anymore. She was being called. Over the next few days, Adanna started asking questions very carefully, the same way you would test a rope bridge before putting your full weight on it. She learned that Tund had built this exact house 6 years ago, not long before his mother passed away and right around the time Folktale vanished. She also learned that Tund had ordered a section of the old family shrine room at the back of the compound to be bricked shut. The villagers were told it was sealed off for renovations. However, those renovations never happened, and the room stayed closed up to this very day, with its single window painted black from the inside. Adanna also discovered that Folktale's mother, an old fish seller at the big market in the next town, was never even invited to mourn her own daughter properly. She was never given a body, nor was she ever given a good enough reason to stop walking to the edge of the Aziz compound every few months. She would just stand there, staring at the walls, before turning around and walking back home without saying a word. The market where Adanna finally found this fish seller was a whole world of its own. It was a crowded, noisy, bustling place spread across the red earth, covered with patched-together zinc roofs that rattled every time the wind blew through. Traders sat behind pyramids of fresh tomatoes and mountains of dried fish, calling out to buyers in a loud rhythm that sounded half like a song and half like an argument. Adanna made her way past stalls selling fine Kent and colorful wax prints, and past a young boy roasting plantains over hot coals that hissed and spat sparks. Finally, she found the old woman. She was small and bent over, with eyes just like Folake's must have been, sad underneath a brave smile, mending a fishing net with fingers that only trembled a little bit. "You are the new wife," the old woman said without even looking up, before Adanna could even say a word. "I can smell my daughter's cooking on your skin." Adanna's mouth went completely dry. "You know about the food?" "I know everything about that house," the old woman said. She finally set her net down and raised her eyes to look straight at Adanna. "I know my daughter didn't die from any sickness. I know she walked into that house 7 years ago full of life, and she never came back out. I know your husband told the whole town a story, and the town believed it because they didn't want any trouble. But a mother knows. A mother always knows when her child is calling her, even from behind a wall. Then is she." Adanna could barely bring herself to say the word, "alive?" The old woman's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. "Grief that old usually runs out of tears to shed. I don't know, my daughter. All I know is that a spirit who cooks in the middle of the night to guide a stranger's hand is not a spirit at peace. Aya Agba, Tun's own mother, loved my girl like her own child. If it's Aya Agba's hands cooking those meals, then Aya Agba isn't resting either. Because she can't rest while her son's terrible sin is bricked up inside a wall in his own house." That night, Adanna came back home. For the very first time since her wedding day, she didn't eat the food waiting for her on the wooden table. Instead, she followed the smell of it, that familiar scent of too much nutmeg and a secret touch of ginger. She followed it out of the kitchen, across the moonlit courtyard, all the way to the sealed door of the old shrine room. And right there, in the dust in front of that bricked-up, blackened window, she saw something that made her slap her hand over her mouth in shock. There were small, clear footprints, bare feet, pressed fresh into the red dirt. They went in circles around the door, as if someone, or something, had been pacing back and forth there every single night for years, waiting for someone brave enough to notice. She turned around and found Tun standing behind her in the moonlight. His face no longer looked like the proud, confident man who had married her with dancing and drums. It was the face of a man who had been running from something for so long that running was the only thing he knew how to do anymore. "Adanna, come back inside," he said, his voice cracking down the middle like dry firewood. "Tell me what is behind that door, Tund." "It's nothing. Just old storage, my mother's old things. Your mother is cooking for me from beyond the grave, Tund Aziz. She's leading me to this door every single night. Do not lie to me again." A heavy silence stretched between them, thick like harmattan dust. Somewhere out in the dark bushes, an owl hooted twice, a sound the elders always say brings bad news at such an hour. Finally, Tun dropped to his knees in the dirt. The big, strong man who had carried heavy baskets of cocoa on his shoulders since he was 12 years old finally broke down and started crying like a little child. "Folake didn't die, Adanna," he confessed, his voice barely louder than the wind blowing against the compound wall. "She went mad. After we lost our child, a baby boy who was born sleeping in her 2nd year with me, something inside her broke, and I didn't know how to fix it. She started talking to shadows. She stopped eating. She would walk out into the bush at night, and my own mother would find her sitting among the graves of our ancestors, talking to people who weren't there." He sobbed. "I was ashamed. I didn't know what kind of sickness had taken over her, and I didn't want the town to see it. So I told everyone she died. I locked her inside that room, my mother's old shrine room, where she couldn't wander off or bring shame to me. I told myself it was only for a short time until she got better. But a short time turned into a year, and 1 year turned into 2. Then my own mother, may God rest her soul, found out what I had done. She refused to speak to me ever again until the day she died 6 years ago, right inside that very room, still trying to take care of Folake all by herself. She died with Folake's hand in hers, and I was too much of a coward to open that door and bury either of them properly," Tund wept. "I sealed it shut instead. I told myself it was out of mercy, but it was really just cowardice dressed up as mercy." Adanna stared at him, horror and pity fighting inside her chest like 2 goats locked by their horns. "Is she alive in there? All this time?" "I don't know anymore, Adanna," he whispered. "I haven't opened that door in 6 years. I couldn't bear to know the truth. It was Adanna, not Tund, not the town elders, and not even Folake's fish seller mother, who grabbed the cutlass leaning against the compound wall that very night. She began hacking away at the bricked-up door, her arms burning with pain and her wrapper soaked through with sweat. Meanwhile, Tund stood completely frozen behind her, unable to move, unable to help, and unable to stop crying. Neighbors woke up to the pounding noise and came running with lanterns. Auntie Shade arrived, and then the old fish seller mother herself came. Drawn to the house as if she could feel the wall breaking in her very bones from across the river, when the last brick finally broke loose and fell into the dust, the room exhaled a cold, stale breath of air that made every lantern flicker at once, and there, in the far corner, wrapped in a piece of cloth so old it had turned the gray color of ash, sat a woman. She was as thin as a reed, her hair had grown wild and long, and her eyes were open and fixed on the doorway. As if she had been waiting patiently for this exact moment for 6 long years, Folake was alive. She didn't speak that first night, nor the next day. The doctor who came from the clinic 3 villages over said her body had survived on whatever tiny bits her mind let her believe was food, on rainwater leaking through a crack in the roof, and on a strong will that refused, against all logic, to give up on life completely. But on the 3rd night, after her own mother had washed her, fed her warm broth spoon by spoon, and sung her childhood lullabies, Folake finally spoke a full sentence. Her voice sounded rusty, like a door hinge that hadn't been used in years. She cooked for me, Folake said, staring into space. Mother Aya Agba? Even after she died, she never stopped cooking for me. Every single night, I smelled her contamire stew coming through the wall. And as long as I could smell it, I knew I wasn't forgotten. The elders of Alare gathered within the week, just like elders always do when a crime this huge cracks open the town's conscience. Tund knelt before the council beneath the giant baobab tree in the middle of the village, and he confessed everything: the baby boy he had lost, the wife he had hidden away out of shame, the mother he had disobeyed, and all the years he let a lie turn into truth simply because he was too afraid to break it. The elders sat in silence for a very long time. Then the oldest among them, a man with a deep voice like slow thunder, spoke up. You buried your wife alive out of shame, Tund Beloa, even though her body was still breathing, the old man said. And by doing that, you buried your own mother's peace along with her. A mother cannot rest while her child's cruelty walks around free and unpunished. The dead have their own ways of finding justice, and they are very patient, much more patient than the living. He continued, tonight, we will do what should have been done 6 years ago. We will give Aya Agba her proper funeral rites so her spirit can finally put down her cooking spoon and rest. And you, Tund, will spend the rest of your life making right what you broke. Otherwise, the food that once fed a wife to save her will one day come back to punish the husband. That same week, the whole town gathered for a proper funeral service for Aya Agba. It was 6 years late, but no less sacred. Drums were beaten, mourning clothes were torn, and palm wine was poured onto the red earth to welcome her spirit home at last. Adanna stood right beside Folake. Surprisingly, despite everything, the 2 women had grown as close as sisters during those short, strange days, bound together by a secret neither of them had asked for. As the elders brought the ceremony to a close, Adanna swore that right as the final drumbeat faded into the evening air, a warm breeze blew through the compound. For just a split second, it smelled unmistakably of nutmeg and ginger, and then it was gone. No plate of food ever appeared on that wooden table again. In time, Folake chose to move back to her mother's house by the river to heal slowly and fully, far away from the walls that had trapped her for so long. Tund didn't end up as a completely evil villain cast out at the end of the story, because that's not always how real justice works. Instead, he became a deeply humbled man. He spent the rest of his days taking care of the wife who had freed him from his own silence, as well as the wife whose suffering he had caused, providing for both of them with whatever honor a man can still offer once his shame has been exposed to the light. And Adanna, the wife who had cooked for a ghost without ever touching a pot, became famous throughout all of Alare. People didn't remember her for the fear she had survived, but for the incredible bravery she showed when courage was hardest to find, the courage to keep asking questions when everyone around her preferred to stay silent. So, my friends, if there is one lesson this old story wants to leave in your hands like a warm coal wrapped in a banana leaf, let it be this: the truth, just like good food left uneaten, does not simply disappear just because you refuse to look at it. It waits, it grows patient, and sometimes it finds its way to your table even when every single door in the house is locked. Because some hungers, the hunger for justice, the hunger for peace, and the hunger to be remembered properly, can never be starved into silence forever. Secrets buried in shame don't rot away quietly like a body does. They ferment, they wait by the wall, and one night, they will knock, wearing whatever form they need to, until someone brave enough opens the door. If this story kept you watching all the way to the very last word, you already know what to do. Like this video, subscribe for the next story, and tell me in the comments down below where in the world you're listening from today, and whether you would have had the courage to break down that wall.